Hi, everyone.
Hi.
And once again, we've got a really exciting episode planned for today, because today's topic is finances and taxes.
Cool. And the thing is, these are the very tools that give us socialization.
For many years, humanity has been trying to figure out how to interact with others in a fair way, where everyone's work is valued and compensated, and where it actually benefits society, and so on. But let's start with something simple. We're all a little idealistic, and at some point in growing up, or even in adulthood, we start asking this question. Will there come a time when we stop working just to survive and start living simply to enjoy life? Will that happen in the future?
We need to go deeper into biology, because when our body produces adrenaline, it gives us that surge, the drive to act. But the moment we slide into inertia, all the programs, all the processes start to shut down and we begin to degrade. So it's essential to maintain a balance, to keep that interest and drive alive, and at the same time to make sure it doesn't slip into stress. That's why the psychological aspect of finances and taxes is so important. And we can't afford to become too calm or inert, but at the same time, we need to find balance so it doesn't start to look like we're constantly chasing something somewhere for some reason.
These days, there are already quite a lot of people who work with joy. For those whose business and their field of activity are a way of life, and everything else, finances, profits, and so on, those are just nice bonuses that come from the process of living. But those people are still the minority.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Yeah, it's interesting, but if we look at how many people live on planet Earth, then honestly, we'd be lucky if even 1 in 100,000 were in that kind of resourceful state. And even then, there are a lot of questions about them, because I've personally gone through burnout. Even while doing what I love, I'd get completely absorbed in it, and then at some point I'd realize I don't want to do this anymore. And the ability to shift, the ability to quickly switch to one thing, then another, then something else, that's what gives you balance, financially, health-wise, and in your overall interest in life. Because we don't want finances just for the sake of having them. We want them in order to use them. Finances are a tool for fulfilling desires, from social needs all the way to personal and family ones.
Based on what you just said, does it matter whether a business has one specific direction or whether it's better to add related areas and branches so it stays interesting and you don't even need to switch? You just shift from one business to another, from one department to the next. Some businesses are big enough that there are tons of departments, and there you definitely never get bored. You've got to understand legal stuff, finances, and the creative parts too.
I don't think you need to understand everything, otherwise you'll run out of energy. It's better if a person becomes a specialist in one thing and can more or less grasp the related fields they have to interact with. Because if, let's say, a singer starts worrying about how the lighting guy is going to set things up, or how the cameras will shoot, or how the marketing and ticket sales are going to work, I think that will definitely hurt the artistic side. So it's important, at least for now, to do what you love, and to find people who will handle the other parts of that work, people who are professionals and who love their work just as much.
Returning to the core question, will we actually work less in the future? Will people enjoy life more while finances get pushed back to the 3rd or even 10th place? Will they just serve some functional role, or maybe even disappear altogether?
Well, when we're talking about enjoying life, we're really talking about dopamine, endorphins, serotonin, and our job is to support those, not artificially, but through certain habits, conditioned reflexes, and the kind of environment we choose to show up in. Because I know guys who, let's say, get real pleasure just from playing football, and that's a pretty serious physical load. I know others who play basketball or volleyball or tennis just for fun, and that's also intense, but after that, they feel energized. So even when our work might involve some physical effort, maybe even a lot, it's our attitude that will determine how much we enjoy it. And we'll have to focus on several areas at once. On one hand, it's important to have a job you love. On the other, it's crucial that The tax system and social structure support that, encourage our development, because that means we'll have the stimulus and opportunity to stay motivated. Because if we lose interest and slide into inertia, then honestly, that society is guaranteed to fall apart.
And what should the incentive be for earning money?
Game, just like playing a game.
The excitement?
Yeah, probably the excitement of the game.
What about competition?
I think competition is the worst kind of incentive, because if we stick to the core principle, do good and it will return to you many times over, if we support others, then we'll simply be given new milestones, new areas, new stages, new levels where we can grow. But if we go around trying to wipe out others in business, leaving no space for other people to participate in this or that field, then we're going to start slipping, because there's still this concept of collective consciousness. And when lots of people on planet Earth think in the same direction, more complex energy information structures begin to form. And sooner or later, someone will receive some brilliant idea and they'll share it with others, and everyone will benefit.
Still, it's commonly believed that it's good when there's market competition between global players. There's that drive to make your product better and so on.
If we're operating from the dual world model, where everything's rigid and the meaning of life is survival, then people who rise to a certain level still carry that survival mindset in their subconscious. And they start, whether consciously or unconsciously, suppressing or eliminating competitors. Because today, we're already facing a situation where Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube have taken over the market. And if there were, as you said, 10 to 15 to 30 solid players entering those same spaces, I believe each of those products would improve by at least dozens, if not hundreds of times in quality and value for users.
But what's the block right now, at this moment? Maybe it's about human capacity. Like someone picks one media platform for themselves, and usually very few people go explore others or switch later.
The reason is very simple. Fear. Just fear. It's all about fear. Deep fear. It's like choosing McDonald's or Burger King and going there all the time. But at some point, your body says, I don't want to go there anymore. So you go to a different restaurant. And if you walk into a food court with lots of options, you've got room to experiment. But if all you see is one single McDonald's and nothing else nearby, you kind of want to try something new. But knowing there's nothing else around for kilometers, you still go back out of habit. And by then, you're eating it without the enjoyment you'd actually like to have.
Okay, but if we go back to our topic, then it turns out that in order for people to work less, something needs to shift on a deeper existential level in our society. The meaning behind why we live, our values, and all that.
Again, I'm not talking about people who work 15 hours a day and still get minimum wage because the job itself is paid and unskilled. I believe those kinds of jobs should be replaced by robots and machines. And maybe people will end up working on average 6 hours a day, and that will be totally fine. What matters is that it's interesting to them, that they feel the excitement, and that they have other areas they can switch to. Because when someone throws all of themselves into work or into family or into some projects, sooner or later, whatever part of life they've been ignoring, whatever they didn't give attention or energy to, it will start to decline. Even that thing they were enjoying so much, it will drop too.
All right, let's talk about the system we currently live in, what we're guided by, and how we live in general. Our second question is this. Retirement systems in most countries won't be able to keep paying out in a few decades unless they're reformed. So, is it important to set aside money for retirement or invest in alternative pension funds?
That question comes from the perspective of an average person, someone who's used to going to work out of fear that they won't have money.
The question is coming from the reality that a lot of people, including our parents, and yes, maybe less so now, but in many conservative countries, it's still very common for them to save specifically for retirement. So what can those people expect?
Since we're talking futurism, and futurism is all about the future, if we want to move into a future where people live in love, then we have to get rid of fear.
And of retirement, too.
When people think about how they'll live when they're old, that's a huge fear. Because when I was 20 and came back from the army, the first thing I heard from my parents was, you have to go work in the coal mine. because that way you'll have a stable retirement. So my parents thought that at age 20, the most important thing I was supposed to be thinking about was old age. In my opinion, that's a completely wrong approach. We need to be thinking about how to keep our interest alive in what we love to do, and through that, create a sort of safety cushion through high turnover and finances in our own business, so that the issue of retirement doesn't even come up. Because only people who live passively, perform some function, and operate mostly out of fear, only they will be deeply worried about what kind of retirement they'll have. When I travel through Europe and I see older people in their 60s, sometimes 70s, driving convertibles and expensive cars, I understand they lived their lives and are still living in a way where they're doing something that brings them enough income not to think about retirement. And our goal is to get out of that mindset that we have to survive.
Of course, everything you're saying, that's exactly what every single person on this planet would want by default. If we take the first question, everyone wants to live and enjoy life. If we take the second, everyone wants to have enough money to not just forget about retirement, but to not worry about anything at all. So our task is to take things beyond linearity and build out algorithms that would at least help a person understand their first steps, or maybe their next steps, or give them some kind of average direction.
I really want to apologize for not giving a straight answer to the question. It's just that the question is much deeper than it looks on the surface. Because here's the truth. If we start giving people total stability, they will die faster than their actual physical condition would suggest. That's why if we don't change the psychology of people, we can't even start talking about pensions, retirement age, or minimum wages. Let me give you an example. I've seen this very clearly. When successful children support passive parents and give them more money than they're able to accept, digest, or make use of, those children start to have problems in business. Because what we're really talking about here is energy informational dependency, where everything seeks balance. And when someone, for instance, physically can't eat more, their stomach and body just don't need that much food, and we still give them more, the system responds by creating a situation where the person giving the food starts to lose access to it. So what we need to understand is this. If we actively start taking care of all pensioners who, on a subconscious level, aren't financially or materially ready to receive that kind of care, their subconscious will begin to create conditions in which the state will simply lose its ability to keep providing according to need. Because we shouldn't be looking at collective need. We have to look at individual capacity, because if one person is given, for example, $10,000 a month, and even that isn't enough for the next 10 days, they'll still use it very efficiently. But for another person, $1,000 would be way too much. And they'd start having serious problems, mental, physical, or event related.
But if we come back specifically to the idea of pensions, let's imagine some layer between our current reality and that distant, well, maybe ideal, isn't quite the word, but desired future. Let's call that in-between layer a kind of metaverse. Everyone's building metaverses right now. We will build one too. But not digital, just abstract, in our minds. And in this imagined metaverse, where there's no such thing as retirement, what is there?
The value of each individual. I've noticed something. Europe once went through a real boom, a huge boom, and many of today's European pensioners lived through that period. And I see a big difference between people who are 40 to 55 now and those who are 60 to 80. Why? Because when you talk to older people in Europe, their eyes shine. They're genuinely interested in life. Why? Because they were part of the economic rise, the building of that flourishing world that Europe became. Now we're in a period of stagnation. And once again, it's tied to this psychological attachment to a certain level and the desire to cling to it. And from that comes decline. So I'd say this. Today's European pensioners, I'm speaking about Europe for now, I actually really enjoy talking to them. Because you can still feel that potential in them, the same potential that helped grow Europe's economy during their prime. And I honestly wish those people looked 3 times younger and had 10 times more health. because Europe is standing today on the shine in their eyes and their hunger for life. And when they're gone, it's going to be extremely difficult, let's say, to revive the economy without introducing some kind of stimulus, interest, excitement, a proper approach to taxation and business support, because the level of obsession with stability is just too high. And as always, the greatest stability is in the cemetery.